Hello everyone, I'm Brian Kozak and I am running to be your sheriff. And the reason I'm running is to really bring about change within the sheriff's office, to change the leadership culture from what it is now, which I believe is a toxic culture, to one that is positive, so that we can begin working on the issues affecting our community. Number one is going to be the impact of crime in 2021. Number two is going to be really investing in those employees so that they stay on the job, because right now we know they're walking off the job like crazy. And so really giving them the tools that they need, the leadership culture, so that they really like working at the sheriff's office. And the last thing is to restructure the jail so we're more efficient and stop that jail door from spinning out of control with drug addiction offenders coming in and out, which is the root cause of our crime. Thank you.
My name's Wrede. The reason I'm running, I was 18 years on the bomb squad, 19 years on the mounted unit, both of which are joint units between the police department and the sheriff's department. And during that time, working with hand in hand with the deputies, I saw what I would call some things that could be better. The way the sheriff's department treated their deputies, what they expected of them, how they took care of them. They had a pay issue that dates clear back to 2014. They've had losing people since clear back to 2014. So these aren't new issues that we're talking about. Right now they're extremely short. They're losing people every day, and we need to change that. And I believe that I am the one to can fix that problem, and that's why I'm running.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending. I'm Don Hollingshead. I am running for Laramie County Sheriff. I have worked for the Sheriff's Department for 27 years. I have the training, knowledge, and experience gleaned through those 27 years to bring about the change, some of the changes that my opponents here are talking about. And currently, as the jail captain and the only candidate who is currently employed as a law enforcement officer, I have been making those changes. With the cooperation of the county commissioners and the other elected officials and department heads, I was able to help secure raises to the staff, for the staff. We went from $22.50 an hour to $26 an hour to start. Systemically, that's a big issue of what's caused the employees to leave within the sheriff's department. The exit surveys bode well to that point. I have knowledge in the rural area experience. I've been the rural area sergeant for a number of years, and I have run just about every area within the agency at one time or another. So thank you. I'd appreciate just great questions and the opportunity to interact.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone in the back? Can you guys hear me okay? Any questions? Okay, Dennis.
A couple of you may go through it. You mentioned a little bit about employee retention and people leaving. You referenced the pay, which pay is always to a degree important no matter where you're at. But I appreciate you addressing that. But beyond pay, what do you see as the biggest reason for the people leaving, and what would you do to stem that slide?
Yes, good question. So when you look at the survey that was released just a couple months ago, and actually they did one last year as well, and unfortunately it got worse this year, just within a year. So you're looking at 62% of the employees in that survey, the ones that are still on the job, are looking for other jobs. And when you look at the comments in the survey, it's on my website, briankozak.com, you can all go look at it. It's really sad to see the comments. They cite leadership cultures. For example, they cite that 73% say that there's poor morale within the agency. You're looking at 65% said no communication between the administration and the line level people. And then you're looking at pay was also an issue too at 67%. But here's the thing with the pay. So that's great that the commissioners is going to raise that, but is it going to be fair with the senior people in place? And so I think we're going to have additional issues as we move forward unless we can really narrow down on those issues. but it's gonna be the culture. So when you look at the comments, you can see, hey, I wasn't treated fairly when disciplined, I was disciplined when someone in administration, a lieutenant, was not disciplined. Things like that was the overwhelming thing that came forward in that culture.
I would reiterate pretty much everything Brian said, but I also know for a fact, people will stay for less pay if they've got quality leadership, where they feel that they are valued, and that they're an asset to that agency. I honestly believe that what we need to do is set standards of what it takes to get hired. If we can set standards and make it an honor and a privilege to work at the Sheriff's Department, bring back that pride to the Sheriff's Department, that we don't just hire anybody to be a deputy. And I don't think we should. Honestly, our deputies, our law enforcement in general should be held to a higher standard than our general citizens. We're there to enforce the law. So we can't just give that job to anybody. We have to have those standards. They have to meet these standards to get hired, and then we've got to train our deputies. And we did train the deputies and our officers in case law, constitution, and state statutes, and how those three things work together. We need to put standards into promotions. Get rid of the buddy system. I'll promote you because I like you. I'm going to push you into promotion because you're a... Well, I won't go there. We're going to stop that game. We're going to put standards in hiring. We're going to put standards in promotions. We're going to put standards on discipline and what are our expectations. That's really what they want. They want solid leadership. They'll do it for less money if we've got the leadership.
First off, I'd like to address the survey. The survey that's been mentioned, as both of my candidate opponents here have retorted about, they say 62% or 65% of Sheriff's Department employees. There was only 51% of the staff that actually, right around there, that actually took the survey. So if you're saying 62%, 65%, split that in half, so you talked about 30% of the department employees. As far as the retention and things like that, we do positive things within the Sheriff's Department to promote good morale and things like that. In the hiring process, out of 30 people that apply, we might get one. We vet them very seriously. We put them through an extensive background check. We put them through polygraphs, psych evaluations. So you get 1 out of 30, that's pretty tight statistics on who we allow to be a sheriff's deputy. And in the promotional process, we go through an outside group to come in, made up of chiefs and sheriffs and stuff across the state. They come in and it's a cadre of people who ask specific questions. It's not a good old boy system. These people have to be vetted by outside people. So as far as keeping people, some of the things I do, I'm a Christian man, I believe in promoting people's emotions to make them better. We put out great inspirational things through the jail each week. I do things to inspire them. I do things to let them know that I care. I work in the jail in the housing units. I am the only captain in the history of this jail that has been coming at 3 o'clock in the morning to work side by side with my staff to let them know that I care and I am there to support them. So these are the things that I do personally to ensure that the employees are taken care of and know their value.
Thank you. Great question, Dennis. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any questions?
Just to follow on. So why do you think you only had 30% of people answer the survey then? Why didn't you have everybody else, the rest of your staff, answer that survey?
Please repeat the question.
The question was, we only had so many percentage answer the survey. Why didn't we have more or get more to answer the survey? I can't force people to answer a survey. It is by their choice. We put out numerous opportunities. I did personally saying, hey, we need to know what you have as grievances or what you think would make things better. I'm the only administrator in the jail that I know of that has gone to my staff personally and asked them, what do you think would make the jail better? What do you think would make morale better? I asked them individually from the line deputies on up.
So I've talked to a lot of employees, current and prior, from the sheriff's office, and I think to answer your question, they've lost confidence in the sheriff's office, and so that's why a lot did not take the survey. I've talked to people who took the survey, and they're like, we're just hoping someone finally listens to us. And I think what we really need is to hold the leadership accountable, to really make sure we put the employees first. We put the leaders should be secondary. So in other words, we should serve those men and women on the job first before we put ourselves first. And so really creating those values and the vision of the agency, which I think is missing. So those employees are looking for a vision. And I think once all that is in place, once we start putting that in place, these employees are just going to flourish and start bringing forward their ideas. And so they're not bringing their ideas forward right now because they believe they're not being heard.
I also have talked to several deputies, former and current, and they're almost afraid. They're afraid of reprisal if they come out and say something against them. I've had multiple tell me that if it comes to light that they said something against the staff, staff starts headhunting. So I can see why they're not answering their questions. So like I said, we've got to be fair, and we've got to bring back that leadership. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And instead of making excuses for the climate survey, let's take it to heart and fix these issues instead of making excuses.
In that climate survey that was taken back in January, we did take it to heart. I went back and talked to the staff, I talked to the administrative staff, and at the time, the deputies were having to do extremely rigorous amounts of overtime because of COVID issues, because of manning issues. What I did is work with the staff to ensure that we corrected those issues, and we have. Now the inmates, they used to be out 16 hours a day out of their cells in the housing units. I cut that down to 2 hours out a day to ensure that we didn't have to do forced overtime. So the climate has increased. The survey did what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to take a snapshot in time of the issues at the time, and I took the time to address those issues with each individual staff member to ensure that we were being proactive, and the culture is changed as far as how much time the deputies are having to come in on forced overtime. So right now, the issue is short manning, and we are correcting that with the help of the county commissioners and other department heads to address that piece of it. So the survey, yes, I take full credit for that survey. Back in January, there were some issues because we didn't have the staff to be able to appropriately deal with the number of inmates we had, and that is no longer an issue, but it was done through cooperation with the staff and their specific input.
Thank you. So we often hear about fentanyl and other prescription drugs as a growing problem. We hear this as a workforce issue. What would you do to solve that?
Fentanyl coming across the border is a huge issue. And not only just fentanyl, but the meth issue and things like that, all drugs related to what's coming across the border. And what we are doing as an agency, we have partnered with the other area agencies, DCI, we have people in task force, we run a rigorous canine program to try to get drugs off the street through traffic stops. In the jail, what we do when people come in that are addicted to these drugs, we try to ensure that through this LEAD program, it's called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, we try to get them diverted from into treatment programs instead of arrest. Once they come in the jail, we also have a LEAD program within the jail that identifies those people with mental health, drug addiction issues, which usually go hand in hand, and we pair them with groups like Volunteers of America and other addiction issues groups out in the public, so that we can give a warm handoff and get these people off the drugs. We are working hand in hand, like I said, with the agencies to combat the drug networking in Laramie County, but then we're also taking a serious look and help with the inmates, so that when they're coming out on the street, back out on the street, we get them the ability to get off the drugs. The LEAP program is great because it offers the ability to get housing, to help with employment, to help with addiction issues. Like I said, we are doing things proactively to assist these community members so that they're no longer addicted. That's one of our big pushes, is to help release that pressure of the addiction on these people so that the crime rates follow. Because with drugs, mental illness and things like that, you have a property crime. So if we can get one tackled, then the other falls suit.
Crime is, or drugs are a huge issue. A lot of it has to do with our lack of law enforcement. Went to Alvin back in January, and from 85 to the town of Alvin, which is 16 miles, there's 4 cars parked on the side of the road, okay? Just parked there with their lights off. These aren't farmers and ranchers that are parked on the side of the road. My training and experience would tell me they were probably drug mules transferring drugs, okay? The way to combat this is get law enforcement back out there and have them in those rural areas checking on these cars, figuring out why they're out there. The other thing is, I was 21 years with the Cheyenne Police Department. During that time, the Cheyenne Police Department was always involved with DCI, DEA. We even had our own drug officers. At that time, they were called SEU. They've been changed to called CAT. Every chief changes the name of them. But we've always had drug officers. The Sheriff's Department had drug officers too. The police department, our officers were always out trying to catch the drugs. They took great pride in how much drugs they could catch. Well, to solve this problem, what we need to do is continue these programs. DEA, DCI, our own drug units, and allow our officers, train our officers in interdictions, and allow them to work and push them to go out there and find the drugs and do their job. That's what we need to do. We need to get them trained and encourage them to do it.
So number one is the sheriff's office is down 50 employees. So they don't have time to do much other than take calls right now and do what they have to do. So changing that culture so we can start recruiting again. Officers or deputies are not going to come on the job here until that culture changes. So you got a lateral from out of state, let's say California, you want to recruit them. They're going to come here and check and talk to other deputies, and the deputies are going to say, don't come here until we change that culture. So we're not going to do anything until that happens. So compared to the Cheyenne Police Department, there's a waiting list for employees. They're full staff. No problem with recruiting over there because of the culture. Now, so right now the deputies also are not making those proactive stops because they're worried about unfair disciplinary action if they do something that's perceived as being wrong. So again, you're not going to get proactive action until that changes. And as far as, so I'm a drug recognition expert. I have been for 30 years. I teach all over the country on drug impairment and drug addiction. And so that's why I'm so passionate about restructuring the jail. I want to incorporate a formalized drug treatment program where we have a master level social worker on staff who does what's called ASI's, Addiction Severity Index, so that we can assess inmates when they come into the facility to see what level of treatment they need, if they need treatment at all, and then start that process. Because right now they have to wait until they're out of jail, which can be sometimes a year later. And so the whole criminal justice system is stalled until that ASI is completed. So we want to get that done right away. And if they require, let's say, residential treatment, then their defense attorney can petition the court to be put into a program. And if they're accepted, we can get them out of jail if it's a low-level offense like a property crime, into a program so that they can begin treatment and save taxpayers money by just having them sit in jail. Another thing, right now the jail does have Narcotics Anonymous, but those are peers coming in to talk to the inmates. It's not a formalized drug treatment plan. And I'm so happy, Don, that you incorporated the LEAD program into what you're doing. I was passionate about that program 3 years ago when we obtained the grant from CRMC by working in collaboration with CRMC. And so that has expired with the police department. And Don, you volunteered to take that on into the sheriff's office, so I'm glad. I've been talking about doing more handoffs to programs in the community, and if you're actually going to be doing that, that is a great step in the right direction. And so, and Boyd, you talked about drug interdiction. That is very important. So as police chief, I switched the narcotics unit, which we call Community Action Team CAT, over to DEA. So the reason we did that is so that we could swear in our detectives as federal agents, and they can go anywhere in the U.S., Colorado, Nebraska, where the drug dealer is, to apprehend them. So that was a big change for the police department. That was brand new, and it's been very effective. Our unit actually went after his #2 guy in the cartel, and we have an outstanding war for him in this country. So if he ever comes back, but yeah, thank you.
Dale's doing a good job watching the clock. Those are all great questions. Does anyone else have a question for the group? Yes, sir.
So do you guys feel that public perception about the police is positive? If you disagree with that, how would you work to change that?
You know, we are fortunate living in Wyoming. Wyoming is still very supportive of our law enforcement. Cheyenne Police Department, Laramie County Sheriff's Department, our community still supports us. I do believe that the Sheriff's Department, because of their manning issues, the fact that they cannot go out and handle the cases, that their response time is too long, they have been getting a black eye. We need to fix this. And the way I see to fix it is, I want to get the Sheriff's Department man back up. I want to get the Sheriff's Department deputies back out in the rural areas. And I want them stopped, and if they see somebody out mowing their yard, moving a herd of cows, plowing a field, whatever, just stop and visit. They run into a gas station, stop and talk to the clerk, talk to the patron. If we can change people's behavior without writing the tickets, that is really our job. Our job is to correct behavior as law enforcement. Our job is not to punish. That's the job of the courts and the prison system. Our job is to change behavior. And the only way we can change behavior is getting back to our traditional Western values, where we have a human relationship with our citizens. If you know who the deputy is in Alvin, and you live in Alvin or close to Alvin, and you can call that deputy up and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, can you keep an eye on it? And have that contact, that's how we get a better view from our public.
I'd like to echo what Boyd said. When we had a very robust rural area deputy division, I was the sergeant over that area and then later the lieutenant over that area. That's exactly what we did. We had the ability, the public did, to just call up their deputy. They called them their deputy. They didn't want a town deputy. They wanted a Billy Swearingen, or they wanted another person that was out there to come to their house to talk to them, and we did that. We will get back to that again, but that's going to take a bit of time, and none of the candidates here can fast track that because it takes a while to get that set up and get people in. If one deputy per 30 applicants is the norm, then we need a heck of a lot of deputies to apply, or people to apply. And with the pay raises that we've got in place with the commissioners, that will happen, but it'll take some time. As the rural sergeant, the only one here that has been out in that area and been visiting with the farmers and ranchers, getting to know them personally, I do know exactly what Boyd's talking about, and that's what we did, and that's what we will do again under my leadership.
So generally, in Wyoming, it's positive reception from the community to police officers, deputies, troopers. You know, I don't think it could be any better as compared to other parts of the country. So we have it good here, you know. But it could be much better. So what I hear from people, especially in the outlying areas, and I spent last week going to all the outskirts and talking to all the ranchers and ranch hands. And number one thing is we haven't seen a deputy in 4 or 5 years. We haven't seen not one deputy in that time period. And so bringing back the rural deputy program is really important, but again, it's not going to happen until we start recruiting and we're able to recruit. Another thing, that the residents, let's say out in that more outskirt area, want to see, and especially law enforcement, like here's Chance, he's a chief in Pine Bluffs. They would like to see some cooperation, working together as a team, law enforcement and the troopers. They want to see deputies working with troopers and other police department officers, which is not occurring right now, because somewhat of a culture with the sheriff's office of, you know, we can do things ourselves, we're operating in our own silo. So again, changing that culture and making it one big team. So one of the things I want to do is get mutual aid contracts with all the police departments, the surrounding sheriffs in the other counties, and our adjoining states as well, so that our cops can do what they need to do and feel like, you know, they're good to go. They have full authority to help each other. Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask how your department, how you feel your department is prepared to engage and respond to the needs of vulnerable adults as you're out in the community? So if you're coming across an older population or perhaps adults that are responding to something going on around them in a way that any deputy may not recognize the needs to then communicate and perceive properly so that we're avoiding unnecessary incarcerations and things like that.
I'm glad you asked that question because it's one of my passions. The question was, what can we do as an agency? How are we prepared or geared to be able to make contact with at-risk people out in the community to ensure that the ones that don't need to go to jail don't go to jail? And that is a wonderful question. And as the captain of the jail, when I came back over from the patrol side, I saw such a culture shock in my mind of we didn't engage the community in that way. Within the jail, we are all in for helping our mentally ill. We're all in for helping the people with addiction. But it goes further than that. Contacting people out on the streets. We have the deputies being trained on the CIT program, so it gives them the tools necessary to make the judgment on, is this person really an issue of public safety or are they in need of our assistance? There's a difference there, and we need to make sure that we have the compassion as law enforcement officers to see that, recognize that, and act upon that. We're also starting a program where we have a ride-along person that has a mental health training background to go to calls, because law enforcement, we're not trained in that to the degree that these individuals that have had the schooling, knowledge, training, and abilities to do. So we're partnering with people with those backgrounds through CRMC so that we can bring that to the streets and better handle those, because the jail is not a place for the mentally ill. It just is not, folks. I can't stress that enough, and I will pound that into the ground. That's why we have a mental health unit that we've created in the jail to help address the people that are seriously at risk that could end their lives in the jail. We have a special unit just for that to take care of them. And through the LEAD program, we identify those people with addiction and mental health issues. So we are really on board and all in for the citizens of Laramie County to tackle not only that, but the homeless. We have a program where we give them clothing when they get released. We give them information on how to find services in Laramie County. These are the things that I am doing, have been doing, and will do as your sheriff.
Sir?
Crisis intervention team, very important. So when I was chief, we were the only agency in Wyoming to complete the One Mile Initiative, which is a program launched by the International Association of Chiefs of Police that asks agencies to train a certain percentage of your officers in peer support, in crisis intervention, and then to actually partner with the hospital to have mental health professionals ride with police officers to respond to mental health calls, and also to train 100% of your staff in mental health first aid. And so we were the only agency in Wyoming to complete that. And we started that program, and it's still going right now. And the Sheriff's Office actually became a member as far as going out with the counselors as well. So another thing you gotta look at when you're looking at vulnerable adults, you're looking at having a proper policy in place when you're dealing with those on calls. I'm not sure if the Sheriff's Office does, the Police Department does. As far as dealing with people who are deaf, again, the Police Department, trained officers had a policy on that. Dealing with people from different cultures, different countries who don't speak English, again, what's your policy on that? Do you have availability of translators to the translation line, telephone line? So making all those services accessible to police officers is very important. And again, I don't know if the sheriff's office does that. Thanks.
There's already several programs in place, CIT. The hospital is helping out, but it can always go farther, all right? We need to remember training. We've got to train and continually train our deputies that are going to be out on the road and in the jail how to recognize these signs. It could be a mental health issue. It could be a medical issue. A person with diabetes can present as a DUI. You got to be able to recognize that. And the only way to do it is training. So we incorporate the programs we already have, we take it further. I've been in contact with some mental health people that would be more than willing to come into the jail and teach to further their education. Our mental health education with the law enforcement, for the most part, consists of a couple of less than a day at the academy, and they tell you you are now able to emergency detain somebody on a mental health program. And it's kind of like, well, what am I looking for and how do I recognize this stuff? Okay? So we need more training. We can never get enough training, and we need to continue this training.
Just so everybody's aware, the Laramie County Sheriff's Department has a very robust mental health program. We have 3 mental health professionals on staff, and they do our in-house training to ensure that the staff, the deputies and such, have that training knowledge and ability to interact with these individuals and identify ways to better help them.
More questions? Anyone else?
I have a quick question. What is the average stay of an inmate in Laramie County Detention Center?
That just depends on how quickly the courts are working. I can't give you an exact answer to that. We have people with mental illness, for example, that can spend anywhere from 2 weeks to 14 months, but that's an issue with the courts and the state mental hospital. So we just hold the individuals. We try to push that system along by ensuring that if they're staying here too long, that we get on the DA's office, we get on the Evanston's mental health hospital out there, but we stay in constant track of the people that are in our jail to make sure that they are moving through the process as quickly as possible with what we can do on our end.
So, second part.
Sure.
Can I do the second part? How do you, so that if it's a catch and release system, which it could be, how do we rehab these people? You have all these programs in place that are taking tax monies to rehab people that are there, 72 hours?
What?
Like your drug rehabilitations in the jail, your mental health, all of these things. You're saying you have these programs in the jail, but if they're only there 2 days, how are these programs successful?
Oh, you're exactly right, and thank you for that question, because the Laramie County Sheriff's Department's jail is designed to hold people pre-trial and post-trial for misdemeanor offenses. The ones that come in and out, this is where the LEAD program comes in. We try to divert them before they come in, and then we identify them while they're there, if we have the time. But if they just come and go, there's very little opportunity for us to engage them in that manner. A lot of them stay past the 3 days. We engage them to find out will they be accepted into programs and things like that to ensure that we give them the handoff they need. So to answer your question, it's varied depending on person to person, issue to issue, and crime to crime on how long they stay.
Yeah, I think that was directed towards me because I do want to start the counseling program in the jail. Keep in mind, the most important part is ASI, Addiction Severity Index. That is the most important part, to get that done right away. So maybe the assessment shows the person needs residential treatment. Well, we can't do that in the jail. They're not going to be there long enough. We can't do that. But the defense attorney can petition the court and say, hey, my client needs this. Let's get them in a program. And if approved, then we get them out of jail and into a program instead of just sitting there for sometimes a year. So we're wasting time. And then let's say they get kicked out of the jail, and now the defense attorney wants to start an ASI on the client. Well, the problem is they've gone right back to their friends and they started using drugs again. So the perfect time to do that is when they have detoxed in the jail. When they get kicked out of the jail, it's too late. And so that's why we need to start that process right up front. Now, we could do low-level types of treatment within the facility and start that process and then hand it off to a program in the community if they are released from jail. But doing nothing is not the answer. There are successful programs in Colorado jails. I came from Phoenix, Arizona. Maricopa County Jail had good drug treatment programs within the facility. Good programs can show that we can reduce recidivism, reoffending by 50%. Can you imagine the tax savings on that if we were able to achieve that kind of success? But the answer is to try, instead of right now, is doing nothing.
You know, this all sounds good, and it is. They are absolutely good programs. But what we need to remember, none of these programs do any good unless they choose to take the help. We can keep throwing money at this all day long, but if they don't want the help, we can't force it on them. You can get a defense attorney to petition the courts, but if you don't have a crime to hold in, you ain't gonna get there, okay? We've got to remember, we got to uphold the Constitution at the top of this. It all sounds pretty, but we've got to have the crime to back it up, and we've got to have their willingness to go through with it.
So I've been listening to all three of you talk about employees and their morale, and you're having a hard time hiring people and things like that. I manage 24 women, and so that's a big deal, And so we have, of course, an employee assistance program, and I think about what these deputies and your staff and things are dealing with on a regular basis. I mean, you're dealing with, violent people, mental health issues and things like that. Do you have a program in place, or is that something that you all would put in place if there's not?
Yeah, so as chief, we were the first agency in Wyoming to implement a peer support team, where we actually brought a psychologist on staff part-time to train our officers to assist other officers with a crisis or stressful situations and calls. And that's still in place right now. So we have Dr. Smith, that was a long time ago, and we were the first to do that. Really important program. In fact, it really opened my eyes as chief when Dr. Smith, and I as chief, I had no idea who was going to see her or her counselors. It's all confidential. However, she told me in a 1 month period there were 14 employees that saw her, and I was like, wow, this program is working great. So that's exactly what we want. And so one of the things, a passion of mine is to prevent suicide with cops and first responders, and that's why we worked through the summer raising money for Operation Victory Warrior. We had a couple big successful programs. We raised over $7,500 for this program. And the reason we did this is because after we lost 3 police officers to suicide last year, in 2021, I reached out to some of these agencies to see if they had peer support teams, and they don't. And so Dr. Smith said, we were the only ones, and I think you're coming on board now with the program. When we started our program, we invited the deputies. They initially started training, but they kind of dropped out of with the program, but hopefully you're getting back into it. But where I'm going with this is, I was shocked to find out no other agency has it. So that's why we started this organization to raise money. The money is there for an agency to start a program. So we wanted to make sure they could start a program, get the initial training, and that's why we raised the money.
Barely. Next time I'm gonna kick you in the shin. Peer support is a good program. However, when I first started, anytime we had a critical incident, we had a debrief with a mental health professional for the entire group that was on that critical incident. That was very helpful. Cops don't like to show any weakness. We don't. Cops, military, we're not going to go, have a hard time saying we need help. And we all do. We do. But by having a group debriefing and making everybody talk about how they felt at that time in a group, makes the other officers realize, okay, I'm not the only one having these issues. I'm not the only one feeling this. So we need to go back to having critical incident debriefs with the group add peer support, because peer support's a great program, but it can go farther. It doesn't work for everybody.
Well, to correct Brian, we have had peer support teams for more than 15 years within the Sheriff's Department. We have peer support trainers within the Sheriff's Department. Our Victims Assistance Coordinator is part of the peer support, and we've been doing that with our staff. We have been holding critical incident debriefs for as long as I can remember to bring in these professionals to talk to our staff so that, like they said, and I agree, a cop wants to talk to a cop wants to talk to a cop, okay, so that they know that they're safe. So yes, we've been doing this. We've had a peer support team for a long time with the Sheriff's Department, and it predates Brian's term with the PD. So yes, it's important. Yes, we do things to ensure that our staff are taken care of. We have the EAP program, Employee Assistance Program through the county that we ensure that our staff has information on and has the ability to reach out to resources. We do have Dr. Smith as well coming in quarterly to train on mental health issues and mental health wellness to the deputies. Our mental health staff in the jail teaches mental health wellness to the staff in the jail because 12 hours a day locked up with the inmates is a long time to be subject to that kind of environment. And we do things to make sure we are being proactive for the mental health and well-being of our staff and have been for a long time.
Great, thank you. That was just one of those, you're taking good care of the employees and what that translates to. Yes, they want to, come to work for you, if people see that. So, does anyone else have any questions?
So I have a follow-up.
Okay.
So I get calls every single day from good employers that take care of their employees, that pay competitively, and the math just doesn't work for the number of employees that we need in this county, this state, this country right now. So knowing moving forward that that's the case, talk about the efficiencies you can come up with, because I just got to tell you, I'm doubtful you can find the people. It's just, we are short workforce in this country. How you gonna do with less?
You bet, and I'm an expert on that because I run a jail, and I run a jail with minimum manning, so I'm a subject matter expert. What we did and have been doing through COVID is every few months we had to reevaluate how we are doing things, how we can do things better, and how we can do more with less. When I switched to the inmates being out 2 hours a day versus 16 hours a day, that cut out a huge amount of staff that I needed, so I didn't need to do forced overtime. Going forward, once our manning starts coming up, I am not going back to 16 hours a day. I will moderate it at about 5 hours, but then I can take those extra resources and put them into areas to be more efficient. For example, the nurses come into a housing unit. A deputy is in there with the housing unit with the nurses, and they have to keep track of the entire housing unit and the nurse, okay? Once I have more staffing in place to be able to bring it up to the 5 hours out, I will have a deputy assigned to that nurse and go around with that nurse to be proactive so that the deputies in the housing unit can take care of the inmates and the deputy with the nurse can take care of the nurse. There are so many things that we've had to do as an agency to combat the issues of low manning, and we will continue to do that. And I have a wonderful staff that works with me and the deputies that come up with these ideas from the line level. They'll bring it up, we take those ideas and we vet them to make sure that it'll work for the entire agency, the jail side, and we put them in place. These are things that the staff has come up, brought up to chain of command, that we as a command staff listen to and implement because they're the ones, the boots on the ground in the housing units that understand how things need to operate.
So recruiting is possible. Like I said, the police department has a waiting list and they're fully staffed. I came from an agency, Mesa, Arizona, where I was actually the commander over hiring and recruiting, and we had to hire at least 100 police officers a year because we had a large agency there. The most important part in hiring and recruiting people is your recruiting team has to be very personable, very nice, very friendly. And so we got to make sure that's in place with the sheriff's office. The culture, like I said, those laterals coming from other states are going to reach out to current employees to find out what it's like to work there. So that's really important as well. And one of the things as far as being more efficient is I like Don's idea on going to more of a indirect supervision. So I think previously they were a direct supervision where you have a deputy in a pod with all the inmates, 50 or so inmates in the pod. And I think moving the deputy out into more of an indirect supervision is good. Maybe giving them a platform or a hub where they can watch what's going on might be a good idea, looking at technology. So right now I know the jail is 2 hours a day. I think they're out 1 or 2 hours a day. But one of the issues is, do we have the amount of cameras in place that we should have in a process like that for liability reasons? And do we have the policies in place? Have you got that in place now before you move in that direction? So I think it is a good way to move into that direction. We got to make sure to follow up with doing it right, checking with other jails how they do it. So I actually like your idea on that. And finally, using volunteers. So the Reserve Deputy Program was eliminated by the Sheriff's Office about a year and a half ago. I want to bring that back. There's a lot of volunteers out there who are police officers, retired military. They want to help in some way. So allow them to help. So for example, instead of having a sworn deputy go out and do a bin check, way out in the rural area of the county, maybe have a volunteer can do that, those sort of things, to free up the deputy for other things. So there's a lot of things. I've had a lot of people reach out to me, for example, pilots, who said, hey, why don't you start a posse program, search and rescue program? Oh, search and rescue falls under the responsibility of the sheriff. I think the fire districts have taken it on, but maybe the sheriff's office is getting more involved. There's a lot of volunteers, pilots who said, I'll volunteer my plane, my fuel, my time, if you need an airplane up in the air. So there's a lot of great stuff we could do with volunteers. Thanks.
What's more? Recruiting is going to be tough. However, I have already been in contact with some former deputies and law enforcement officers from outside of this state who, if I'm elected, will be more than willing to come here and go to work. The way to fix it is change, like Brian said, change the culture. Okay, if we can make that agency someplace they are proud to work at, bring back that pride, make some recruiting videos that show the cool stuff that we do, and that open up options for the deputies to get training in. If we make it someplace they want to come, our current employees, the current deputies, would be the best recruiting tool we have. And we've got, I can't stress it enough, we've got to bring back the pride to that agency. We've got to bring back the pride that these deputies have by being an officer. Because being a cop is not something you choose to do. It's something that is in you that tells you, I need to go do this, okay? So we bring back that pride. It's just like the military. People join the military all the time. People join the SEALs. People join Delta because they have that need, and it's a cool job. I get to drive fast, blow stuff up. Okay? Promote that. But anyway, like I said, I've already been in contact with people that are willing to come here if I get elected.
Just one thing to pass along. We do have policies in place for viewing of the inmates on video systems. Our sensor control area, it has banks of monitors to view cameras through out the entire facility. So we do monitor those extensively, and we also have policies in place to handle that. As far as recruitment, we're working with LCCC right now to create recruitment videos to do this, just as he's saying, to show the pride of the Laramie County Sheriff's Department. And I challenge each and every one of you, if you know a sheriff's deputy working in the jail, talk to them. They will tell you what I do, how I am, and how I treat them. And it is with respect and dignity, and they will fight for me and are fighting for me to remain in this position of authority within the agency and become the sheriff of Laramie County.
So I have a question for you. Something we've been talking about in the Laramie County area is liquor licenses. So what is your position on expansion of liquor licenses in Laramie County? And how would that affect your ability to monitor people and things like that?
Me?
Yep, go for it.
Well, as sheriff, it's not really, I guess, my responsibility to give advice on that. It's up to the governing bodies, the state legislature to change the state law on that. And as sheriff, you know, I will follow whatever laws or guidelines that they come up with. Personally, I know that bar owners rely on that income that they have, and I know that they're worried that that income will be reduced if it expands. But on the other hand, you know, I think the demand will not change. People who drink alcohol or people who can drink alcohol, there'll just be more choices for them to make. So really, I guess I have little input on that, but my job as sheriff is to follow the law.
I think our concern is that it's going to be, if there's more licenses available, of course, that's going to be a little more crime and things like that.
A little more spots to cover.
Yeah, spots to cover.
Okay. Again, I came from Arizona where there was no limit on liquor licenses. It was free market. And I really did not see any change, any different in the way we policed or the issues that we had.
As Brian said, it's not, as a sheriff, it's not our job to make policy or laws, it's our job to enforce it. And if the legislation or the governing body says they want more liquor licenses, that's the way it's gonna be, and we will make accommodations to do our job. Ultimately, that's our job, that's what we do, is our job.
With additional liquor licenses in Laramie County, I don't believe it's going to, as the other gentleman said, will have any impact really on the crime rate because it's out there. They're just more people going in one spot. This will diversify it, it will build the economy, it will help Laramie County diversify in other areas. And it doesn't have to be bars, it could be other establishments that, maybe a restaurant that opens up that wants a liquor license, things of that nature. So I think it'll have a positive effect on the economy because it'll diversify more, give people, entrepreneurs, the opportunity to create new businesses and things like that. But as the other candidate said, we as the sheriff's office and as law enforcement, we will maintain whatever issues come up and we will overcome whatever struggles that we're faced with.
Okay, this one. What are your thoughts on legalization of marijuana and how will you handle the spillover from Colorado and their decision to legalize?
When you say hot potato, we have been dealing with this for years with the legalization of marijuana in Colorado. We see it coming over the border into our state. Most of the marijuana, though, stays south because they know that they're safe there. They're going to utilize it there and things like that. Our biggest issue is the harder drugs like the fentanyl and things like that. Yes, marijuana is an issue. I have a real big issue with this synthetic or the marijuana that's been synthesized into things like shatter and dab and things like that that have a huge hallucinogenic effect and a long-term effect on the mental health and well-being. So it is an issue, but we're going to see Nebraska kick into it. We already got Colorado kick into it. If Wyoming decides to kick into it, which I hope we don't, we will deal with that. But we have to tackle what we have presented to us, and we increase things as we get presented with stuff. So as things increase, things change, we as a sheriff's department have to be swift on our feet and modify how we do things to tackle those issues as they come up. Not just things that are present now, but forward thinking in the future on how we will enact programs and policies to be able to keep Laramie County safe and as drug-free as we can possibly make it.
Here again, as a sheriff, it's not our job to make laws. It's our job to enforce it. What I would like to see, though, is if Wyoming does decide to legalize marijuana, sit down with law enforcement and let's learn from Colorado's mistakes and Washington's mistakes, because when Colorado legalized it, the crime rate went up. Okay? So let's learn from those mistakes, and if we're gonna do it, let's do it right. And the way to do that is work with law enforcement. How do we do this to where it's not gonna increase our crime rate? How can we get revenue from this and not just make it a free-for-all like the other states did?
I was police chief in Avon when not the recreational, but the medical marijuana exploded there. So they had licensing for medical cards in Colorado, but when they opened, the health department opened the rules on that, and it just exploded with dispensaries popping up all over the place, and there was no regulation for that. So if Wyoming goes down that path, you gotta make sure you're in front of it and you have all the regulation in place so we don't have a situation like Colorado when I was chief. Now, all those dispensaries popped up and it was a free-for-all with that. However, the people smoking pot were the same people smoking pot before that happened. So there was no big increase. In fact, when Colorado legalized recreational marijuana just over the border here, the people always ask, well, did you have a big increase in the Cheyenne Police Department? And that particular year, we pulled the data. Guess how many cases we had citations issued for marijuana that year? It just worked out this way, 420. So, 420. But it was consistent with previous years. So there was no big explosion. The same people were smoking pot that were smoking before. But if Wyoming goes down that path, again, as sheriff, I'll follow the law no matter which way it goes. Personally, I believe, yeah, we're going to have some more crashes because of marijuana. I don't think the violence is going to go up at all. I've been a cop for 35 years. I've fought a lot of people who were drunk, very rarely when it was smoking pot. But the crashes are definitely going to go up. The hospital visits are going to go up, especially if we have high THC content. So here's the thing. Study shows that there is no medical benefit to a THC content above 10%. None at all. The study is very clear on that. So if Wyoming did that, maybe you want to keep it below 10% THC. But if you do that, then if you're trying to create revenue off of taxes, everyone's just going to go across the border and buy the high content THC. So there's pros and cons to everything. Another thing that I'm really passionate about, feel strongly, is that if we go down that path, you're going to have to strengthen the DUI laws. Don't do what Colorado did by making a 5 nanogram per se law, because if you mix alcohol with marijuana, you can be really impaired below 5 nanograms. Okay, so Colorado made that mistake. And the last thing is our state crime lab. Right now, you as taxpayers pay for the chemical testing of blood if someone's arrested for DUI. That needs to change. It should be a surcharge placed on each DUI conviction that goes to the state lab, so taxpayers aren't having that burden. It should be the offender.
One last question.
Thank you. To that last point, then, are there other statutes that you recognize to be helpful for your department in either enforcing laws or just being able to respond to things appropriately? Because what you're saying is the taxpayers are currently paying for without requiring a state statute change, I would assume.
Yes.
So are there other places that you are aware of that like absolutely if we did this differently, it would be better for us to
Yeah, the question was, are there any other changes in the law that could help us as law enforcement officers or law enforcement leaders? So I brought up the one with the state lab. Another one I think which was beneficial in Colorado, if you had a surcharge on citations that went to police training. So the agencies are not struggling to come up with a training budget, that a portion of what the state collects goes to police training, all right? Because training is so important to the success of policing. And right now, a lot of agencies are struggling with getting those training dollars. And the other thing is pursuits. We've seen a big increase in people running from the cops, high-speed chases going through our communities, strengthening the laws on that as well. We started to, just a couple years ago with the legislature, kind of came a little bit short in doing what they should. That's all I can think of right now.
I apologize, I was a bomb tech for 18 years, so I can't hear quite so well. There's always laws that can be changed, okay? There's always laws that can be changed. But probably more importantly, we could change some laws that contradict other laws. Because that's a big deal. Like Brian said, the pursuit laws, pursuit laws can be changed. There's a lot. I'm not even going to try to give you a list.
I'd just like to echo what my opponent said. Legislation is a kind of a mixed bag. You can change one thing, then it has another effect in another area. So we need to understand what we have in place and not do like they've done with the gun laws and things like that. More laws, more laws, more laws. take the ones we have and actually enforce the ones we have and make it more efficient through what we already have on the books instead of a bunch of legislators fighting over changing something or acting out a new piece of legislation. Just take what we have on the books, strengthen what we have on the books to make it more effective, and we can be more proactive as law enforcement officers with the right tools through state statute to enforce those laws.
So hold on to that.
Yes.
We're gonna wrap up and give you each about a minute to just finish with your closing comments.
One thing I would like you to take away from this is of everybody that's running, whether it's myself, my two opponents here, or the ones that are running as independents or Democrats, I have the overall training, knowledge, and experience with this agency, 27 years. I have worked in just about every position within this agency, and I have worked hand in hand with the staff of this agency as the captain being in the housing units with them shoulder to shoulder. I am the one that leads from the bottom pyramid. As one of my deputies, and the deputies in the jail pointed out on Facebook the other day, is that Don is the leader that leads from the pyramid the right way. It's an upside down pyramid, guys. The leader should be holding up the pyramid, and that's what I do in the jail, and that's what I will do as your Laramie County Sheriff. I will lead and hold that pyramid, and everything above it is on my shoulders, and I have the knowledge, training, and experience, and passion and love for this community to do just that.
Probably the biggest thing I'd like to take away, I'm the only candidate, I have the most diverse background. I'm nationally and internationally certified. I'm the only one up here that was ever a detective. And I've worked hand in hand with federal agencies doing investigations. I've done executive protection with Secret Service. I've been on fugitive task force with the U.S. Marshals. I've worked with ATF and the FBI doing explosive investigations. I've testified in federal court on explosive investigations. I've worked with the military and trained with the military doing explosives. Traveled all over doing mounted unit, going to Denver for the DNC. I worked the 8 days down in Denver doing crowd control with the DNC. My background is just very diverse. So anyway, thank you.
All right, you guys in the Chamber of Commerce, you know me well. When I was chief, I would be here at least a couple times a year to give you what's going on in the police department, good or bad. I was always transparent and honest with you. Continue that relationship with you. Businesses are so important. That's why we started the Operation Change program, really to help the downtown businesses with the issues that we're having. But I was brought in, if you remember, I was brought in by Mayor Kaysen with a national search with all the people who applied. And Mayor Kaysen narrowed it down and selected me because he liked what we did in Avon, Colorado, where we took a police agency that had poor morale, low public support, and we changed that around in just 4 years and became a nationally accredited agency, receiving the National Community Policing Award. So Mayor Kaysen liked that. That's why I came here. A lot of people said, "Oh, this guy from Colorado is not going to make it past a year." But if you remember, it was 11 years I was police chief. And I think people, because they thought I was from Colorado, but I really wasn't. I was from Arizona, conservative Mesa. I was there for 22 years. I was a commander there on the street, and I'm all done. So I really enjoyed the time.
Thank you everyone for coming, and have a great day.